Hello, everyone. Lalitha, would you like to introduce us this week?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channels. And this is Gary Gomes, who is a very renowned Vedic astrologer, probably needs no introduction to most of you. I'm Lalitha Varahi, that's my spiritual name, Lalitha Donatella Ribac. And today we're going to talk about something really exciting. And we're going to help you because this is actually a time that needs to be watched. And so we'll help you to make sure that the results from these planets will be very useful for you and very helpful. And first of all, I would like to take a minute so we all cheer because Mercury is now direct. Mercury has been retrograde since until the 22nd. So we have had 2 days to readjust, and now things are going to work fine. At least I had a breakdown. My computer was down, the system was down. I was launching a new product, a free product I was sending to subscribers. And actually there were some ads running and everything crashed. I started to get all these errors from the system, and with 2 teams trying to help me while all the ads were running. So I can testify that at least 10 things were not working properly on that day. The miscommunication was incredible. I said, hey, everybody heard B. Then they told me, no, you said B. It went on and on. So this was one of those Mercury retrogrades that you really felt because Rahu was involved, right? So when the lunar node Rahu is involved, everything makes screeching noises depending on the nature of the planet. So for example, if it's Mercury, it's the communication, right, Gary? It may get very loud or very impolite or very tense. So now the Mercury is direct, it will give the best. It's very strong now in Taurus, and Venus is now in Cancer, but we'll talk about that later.
Yep.
So I want to tell you another experience with Mercury retrograde because it's something that you can never forget. So I was very comfortable with Mercury retrogrades because I never had any major episode of breakdowns or losing data, which is what most people report. But so one day I got very confident, overconfident, and I went to buy a new iPhone. And I don't remember, maybe it was iPhone 5, iPhone 4. It was way back. And I went ahead and bought this new phone. And when I went home, nothing worked. And I thought this is not possible. So I got help and I spent 3 hours on the computer and then the phone with all the people at Apple. And they still couldn't help me. And then I went to the Genius Bar. And these were problems that even the Genius Bar people could not solve. So it was vintage Mercury retrograde. And then finally I had to change phone, and I finally had a good iPhone that things started finally to work properly. So still, it's true that we shouldn't overestimate these planets when they go retrograde, but we shouldn't be overconfident that we totally ignore the transit, and then we will be facing really extremely out of control situations. And especially if you have an online business, and now we all do, at least I do. So we want to be very cautious. And a few words are just about Saturn and Jupiter, the heavyweights that are retrograde now.
Yep.
Now, I like to talk more about Jupiter because it's one of my favorite planets. Saturn will be a little tense for most people, but then I want to hear also Gary, what he has to do. And what he's going to share with us today about his experiences with Saturn retrograde, maybe, I don't know, or Mercury or Jupiter or another planet. In my experience, and also according to Dr. B.V. Raman, who is a legend, he said that like planets that are retrograde are not really bad. You just have to put more effort, and then things will work out. So you become an expert. As things break down, and then maybe you're faced with obstacles, depending on the nature of that planet, then you become an expert in those things because you have to constantly redo them. For example, Jupiter. Jupiter is about teachings, right? Maybe you're not using the proper tools, or you're not expressing things the right way, or maybe it's about children. So you have to do things several times, maybe even 3 times, he said.
Yep.
So I like that point of view. I also agree with other other experts, but I mean also classical, Maharishis, who said that actually auspicious planets that are retrograde don't harm the things of that planet, at least not very seriously, that you have to be concerned. So Jupiter will be fine, is in high dignity in Aquarius, and some rishis even said that health will improve. The things that are related to Jupiter in your birth chart, according to what Jupiter rules, will be also improving, and you may get even rewards from past deeds that fructify now. So I love that. And also maybe your finances will improve because Jupiter is a wealth karaka. Karaka means a representative of that thing. So Jupiter means also wealth and positivity, etc. Saturn is a different story, and I can testify it hasn't been fun since Saturn went retrograde. The things to do with work, etc. I mean, I'm putting so much effort, way more, like 10 times more, less time for fun and friends and sometimes even family. All right, so that's my experience with Vakri. Vakri means so retrograde and like going a little wacky. Let's use a modern word, right? A little crooked, but more like unusual rather than crooked, I would say. So they do something out of character sometimes, but they make you really an expert at what you're doing. So you have to put more effort. That effort makes you an expert. It makes you it gives you fame even. That's why sometimes retrograde planets make people in that one field experts and stand out in the crowd. So they become famous, right, for what they're doing. All right, so that's been my experience. And I think we have a little shorter video this time, right?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
All right,
Yes, we do.
yeah, I'd
All right.
like to hear from you now.
All right. So when I was first learning about retrogrades way back in 1990, way back before Lalitha was even with us,
I was born. Let's say I was already born.
all right, all right. Is essentially the way I was taught was that retrogrades are stronger but twisted, and so and if you stop and think about what a retrograde planet is, there's a really so they always gain strength in the chart,
Yes.
and that's really not surprising because essentially what happens is slower moving planets always gain strength. And a retrograde planet, because it's moving contrary to its natural motion, will appear to move more strongly than it does when it's in its normal motion. And
so in our consciousness, you're saying, right?
yeah,
Because it
yep,
appears,
exactly.
and they're
Yep,
very close to the Earth plane.
that's right.
Right?
That's
So
right.
that makes them really powerful.
That's right. So they'll be in your face, and that and as a matter of fact, Jupiter was in a stationary direct position roughly last weekend, and it was I can tell you I felt phenomenally optimistic last weekend. I just it was like irrationally optimistic.
That's
And
not bad. That's not bad.
oh no I don't think I love that feeling when it
Yeah,
comes.
it is a good feeling,
And
right?
yeah, so so essentially, and again it interacts with certain planets in my chart. The Jupiter retrograde was interacting with certain planets in my chart, so it was really it was an enjoyable experience for me. But at the same time, what what'll happen is even though they're moving backwards, so we have the Mercury retrograde. So you say to yourself, well, I've covered everything that I've had to do. I've done
Mercury, for Mercury.
every for
I'd
Mercury.
like to hear about your Mercury, yes, because
Yeah,
you're a Mercury person, right?
So Mercury retrograde, like you, it normally doesn't bother me, but when it does bother me, it comes as a total shock. And I've seen several occasions in which I've gone out and gotten phenomenal deals on things during Mercury retrograde. So you said you were actually giving a free service to your clients. That's almost a stereotypical Mercury retrograde activity, because essentially Mercury retrograde just gives, it's free information, it's free products, it's a deal. But it doesn't. But there are always some hidden elements that you have to study and look at a little more carefully in parts of that deal. It doesn't mean you're being swindled, but the deal may not be quite what you think it is. So usually.
So you buy new things, you're saying? Go ahead and purchase big things.
Yes. So you can. You just have to make sure
that it's
they work before
legitimate, right?
before you leave the store. I had two vehicles. I was involved with people who got vehicles just like recently, and this was when Mercury was direct, and there are problems with the vehicles. So they were obtained for a really good price, but they're and again, these are problems that can't be fixed, but there are problems. So I've seen that happen a lot. Also, I have seen like what I would call slipped communications when Mercury goes retrograde. So let's say a person tells you they'll get in contact with you, and it just seems like an uphill struggle to get things to get in contact, or to actually get anything done. On the other hand, when you do connect, it's interesting because you'll feel like you made such a major triumph. It's like you said, it's building a muscle. It's really
absolutely.
It's really so. I can remember going back to the 1970s when I used to listen to Western radio astrology broadcasts. There was this guy in Boston called the Cosmic Muffin who used to do Western astrology forecasting. He would say, "Void of course moon, don't start anything today," and
was it Western astrology or
Western astrology, but also Mercury retrograde. So for the next 3 weeks, don't communicate. And I'm saying to myself, I'm in a job. How can I not communicate? I need to communicate. How can I avoid communications? So,
I love that when they give you that kind of advice. Don't do anything.
Don't do anything. So you have to function in the world, even though Mercury goes retrograde. You just keep in the back of your mind, you may have to redo this, or you may have to restate this in a way that people understand a little bit better later on. And as you said, this one became a little bit more intense because Rahu was involved. And I've seen the most interesting ones, though, and again, I'm going to get back to Jupiter and Saturn, but the most interesting ones have been the Venus retrogrades.
I didn't notice anything particular. I love to hear what you have to say.
So
I heard one thing though about cinematography is very strong when Venus is retrograde. So it actually becomes more favored. People, so more investments, more success.
But sometimes people will seem to be emotionally disconnected when Venus is retrograde.
Relationships,
relationship wise, it'll sort of affect that part of their life. So they'll either feel super strongly or not as strongly. And I've also noticed more problems with vehicles. Also, one of the things I like to remind astrologers is, even though Saturn is associated with work in our charts in Brihaparasha or Shastra, the planet associated with work is Mercury. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. It's so close to the sun, cargo career, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
And it's serving the king. It's essentially the planet closest to
The prince and the king, right?
that's the
Yes,
prince
yes.
and the king.
Oh, sorry, I have a question. Sorry, before I forget.
Yeah.
What about the eclipse? We had a solar eclipse.
Mm,
Mercury was involved in Rahu, right?
yep.
So could it be that this retrograde felt worse because there was a solar eclipse
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
so close together,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. And it also affected a few other planets that were close to it, like Venus
Yes, at the time.
and obviously the sun itself. But but
Mm.
but it yeah, but I think you're right. That's why Rahu seemed to have much more dominance.
Power.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Every bit of it.
yeah,
We can help in the things of Rahu, so
yeah.
astrology and yeah.
And there is something I think we may have said this before, but I'm fond of repeating this to people. I think it was um Brahmahira's son who actually gave it the first position of strength in the planetary system to Rahu and Ketu, because they can absorb the sun and the moon.
Yes.
There's nothing stronger
Oh,
than,
they're powerful.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. There's nothing, so they can only do it for a little while. They can only, but but they are essentially the most powerful things in the chart, and they're almost, well, depending on whether you use true note or mean note, uh, but Rahu and Ketu are almost always um, retrograde. If you use true note,
Yeah.
they're going to be direct once in a while.
Right. Mhm.
But but basically, Mercury will tend to be much more screwed up. Retrograde Mercury will tend to be much more screwed up if it's associated with malefics, or if it's associated with
Becomes a
Rahu and
malefic. Yeah.
Ketu, because Mercury is so,
Mm.
is I always like to equate it to, like, to a teenager. Is essentially,
Teenage prince.
yeah, well,
Teenage
and
prince.
the teenage prince,
Great.
and if the teenage prince is hanging around with bad people,
Yes.
yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah,
That's a good analogy. I like that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
they'll start acting like those people. If he hangs around with good people, let's say like a Venus or a Jupiter, he'll be happy and
Mm, yeah.
obedient, but if he hangs
They'll
around,
work towards a noble cause, or at
yeah,
least semi-noble, right?
yeah. So
Mhm.
so 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 the associations of the planets when they're retrograde are kind of important. Saturn, getting back to Saturn retrograde. So Mercury retrograde is not something to panic about, but it's not something to underestimate either. It's a
Mhm.
force to be reckoned with. But some people, I and I almost get a little bit upset because in Western astrology we have the three, and I'm not criticizing Western astrologers by any stretch of the imagination, but we have the period leading up to the retrograde 3 weeks itself, and then they allow like 3 weeks after that for everything to
Yeah.
straighten out. So
Mhm.
it's almost like half the year is Mercury retrograde.
Exactly.
Yeah, so essentially you're not let off. So you can say really for like half the year, it wasn't my fault, it was Mercury retrograde. The problem is it is your fault because you have to be aware and alert, and you have to build that muscle. You have to build that communication element.
Yes, it is hard
Yeah,
work, there's
yep,
no doubt.
yep,
Lots of redoing everything. I keep rewriting every editing. And no matter how perfect something seems, when I go back, it's
yep.
always imperfect.
Oh, oh,
I
oh,
find one
oh,
more
yeah.
type or one more little thing, a little space, a
Oh,
white
yes.
space, or something that can be improved. And
Yep.
actually, that reflects, if I may interject quickly,
Sure.
it's about what my guru said, Dr. Pillai. He said that every second we have an opportunity to do something better than we did 10 minutes ago.
That's right.
So every second, everything is new that you can improve it. And it seems like common sense, but no, it's not. Literally, this one product now will be better than what you could do 10 minutes ago.
Yep.
I don't know why it works that way, but I find that it's true for me.
Yep.
Like, for example, if I'm not able to do something an hour ago and I spend some time thinking about it, or maybe meditating and doing something else, when I go and redo it, it's amazing. I mean, by comparison,
Sure,
it's
sure.
just, it's an improvement by a lot. So I can see how that works really in practice.
Yeah. And and the and, and talking about Saturn retrograde, you normally end up having to redo work, or work tends to be spoiled or damaged in some way. But
And maybe it's not you, it's the people who are helping you do this,
yep,
right?
yep, yep, exactly.
And it's like you're not communicating, or things break down fast. I don't, it's worse than Mercury retrograde in my case,
Well,
in my experience rather, not in my case, but definitely what I see working it in people's
well,
charts.
well, Saturn is the planet of servants, right?
Yes.
So, so,
Oh
so,
yeah, that too.
so essentially, it's not that you're royalty, and these are, and these are peasants, but these are
Right.
people who are working for you, they're serving you.
Yeah, and you want to be humble, because without them, even you cannot function.
Well,
So
yes, sure,
everybody's equal and everybody deserves respect, right?
right.
And you get a reminder, especially when everything is retrograde, because there's no higher up or down. No, it's everybody's the same for Saturn, and that's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah.
Like
So,
Aquarius, right? Aquarius is very liberal, very
yeah.
open-minded.
And with Saturn retrograde, I often find people retrenching or reconsidering their positions, or just backing off from plans they've made, just in order to figure out how they can do them a little bit more soundly, or a little bit less impulsively. The, the
Changing jobs, you mean?
Yeah, well, not necessarily changing jobs, but essentially trying to establish, not being quite so concerned about making money as getting it right. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
so maybe just a little bit more conservative, a little bit more cautious. Saturn's
Yes.
normally a cautious planet, so the retrogrades will make it more cautious.
You will
And
become great. There's no
yep,
doubt.
yep, yep,
You will be redoing it so many times, everything.
yep,
I have experienced it lately. I saw a huge difference from literally from in 2 days, everything had changed.
yep,
I felt that. And then I had forgotten the date of the actual retrograde. And then I was able to validate that and say, oh, that's why.
yep,
That's why this, that's why that person is doing that, etc.
yep,
And it's amazing how it works beautifully, right?
yep, yep. And in terms of Jupiter, there is a criticism that Jupiter retrograde can make a person a little bit reckless, or a little bit uh, uncautious. But again, one of the ways that we learn is by making mistakes.
Yes.
So so in some ways, that's a perfect setup for Jupiter to teach us, to teach us some more, to
Yeah.
actually to actually so it doesn't necessarily say, so it doesn't necessarily say, it says, well, you're going to run a little bit faster than you can, and if you fall down, then you'll learn from that. It's not even a situation where a person will make stupid mistakes. They'll just go and say, well, I'm ready to do this, and then all of a sudden they'll say, oops, I'm not quite ready to do this. They'll overextend themselves a lot. I've noticed this, a lot of people do, a
So
lot of times.
overconfidence, right?
Yeah, overconfident, and also over willing to commit. They'll overpromise. Okay.
Overpromise. Yeah.
All right. So
Hi.
yeah. So I can do that. That's a habit I'm guilty of. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And then all of a sudden you say, well, you say you can do it. You got 50 people saying, well, he said he can do it. Just leave him alone. And then all of a sudden you find yourself drowning in too much work. And that's one thing. That's one thing that you have to be a little bit careful about with Jupiter retrograde. It's just like running out and taking on too much at once, that you really can't fit all on your plate. So
And so you're saying that Saturn is not overwhelming you that with extra work? Because actually I found also Saturn
Oh,
doing that to me a lot.
no,
I have 10 extra projects I did not plan to have.
yeah, it is, but also Jupiter's doing that as well. So, so when you get a retrograde Jupiter, you get, so I, I got, not new students, but I got assigned because I do teaching elsewhere. And I got assigned around the time Jupiter's turn retrograde. I, I got told by the person running the school that it was just going to be me and her teaching all the students this summer.
How many students?
It's not that many. It's maybe around 15 students, but I've already got 6. Uh, so, so, so
That was surprising.
yeah, and I also got an invitation to prepare something, and then I said, sure, I'll do it. And another project, so I have something connected with my house. You're aware that I'm going on right now, so that didn't get done. So that was how Saturn was hitting me. It wasn't hitting me in terms of my regular work. It was hitting me in terms of property and land issues. So so it
And for
hit me.
you, Saturn is in the 8th house, right? From the ascendant?
No. Saturn's in the 8th house from the moon.
Yeah, and that's very powerful. So it's,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
it's
You're right. Yeah,
Ashtama Shani can be tough.
exactly.
Mm.
So,
But
so I
still,
think,
it's a strong Saturn, so you'll be
yeah,
fine, right?
but, but,
Right,
but,
still.
and a little hard work never killed anybody, right? But
If you see that way,
yeah,
you're a great winner, right?
yeah, but
You're winning.
yeah, but I think that's where the retrograde. So I think you're right. You're exactly right. It's like developing a muscle. Some people, it's interesting because usually the people who have the greatest adversity. So there's an axiom that it takes a debilitated planet to be a real success in Kali Yuga. To be a phenomenal success in Kali Yuga. And the retrogrades, although they're not the same as debilitations, the retrogrades do set up challenges. And
Actually, for some rishis, they even created a Raja Yoga.
yep,
I don't remember the name of these rishis, but they said that auspicious planets, when they're retrograde, they create the Raja Yoga.
yeah.
So I don't know if it's quite that positive, but definitely I've seen that when if a benefic, so when I say benefic, it means beneficial for those who are not familiar with the lingo we are using here. So beneficial planets like Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, when they are benefic also in the birth chart, not just benefic per se, but also benefic for that person, because everything is really individual. It depends on the ascendant, the moon, and aspects. There are so many factors. That's why you need us to know what's really going on and why things are really happening, how you can fix them. So yeah, definitely they create the Raja Yoga one, especially Jupiter.
Yeah, and there's one thing also I've noticed about Saturn retrograde. Saturn retrograde tends to defer debts. So let's say if you owe somebody some money, or there'll be less pressure for you to pay up. There'll be less pressure for you to.
That's good. That's another good one.
So you can see, and actually you can see Senator Schumer from New York is proposing delaying student loan repayments
for
another 6 months. So he's asking
right now.
Right now, right? Yeah, yes, sir. So right when Saturn is retrograde. And I mean that you could look at that as being a common sense, but I just think it's interesting.
No, not necessarily, right?
Yeah.
But the economy is definitely picking up. So Jupiter is supposed to help with the economy in the world being retrograde. So that's not going to be a problem, I think, until it goes back into Capricorn.
Yep, exactly.
Which is not my favorite, but it can work well also for the economy, actually.
Yeah, and when it goes back, and when it goes back into Capricorn, it'll be of a not of a it'll be a Nietzsche Bangaraj yoga with Saturn too. So
Yes, right.
it's not exactly
Well, I didn't like
it's
it.
not exactly the best Raj
It
yoga.
was really tough, I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah, yeah, but
Personally, because I'm a Jupiter person, everything in my birth chart is ruled by Jupiter.
yeah,
And somehow it's associated with all the other planets,
yep.
thank God, except for Rahu. I'm very happy to report that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating because we can look at the charts of let's say Barack Obama, who had the Jupiter Capricorn conjunction in his Jupiter Saturn conjunction in his first house.
And Sun, Saturn too, no?
Yeah,
Sun, Saturn, I think.
yeah, and when he took off, right before he took office, the economy,
Was dwindling.
yeah,
It was bad.
Essentially, it crashed in 2008. It crashed in late 2008,
Exactly. Yeah.
and we're also seeing President Biden's chart is a little bit. There's some dispute about what's going on with that, but he had, but so this is to get into politics. But also we had a kind of a slowdown or more a stunted recovery when Jupiter and Capricorn were together. So it was actually starting to recover a little bit last year. Then it slowed down again. So it's just so that Jupiter Capricorn does tend to slow things down. It doesn't help growth, or else it'll slow the effort towards growth. But again, as you
Then
know,
Saturn will be back, will go to Aquarius. That would be great for the economy.
yeah. I have a
So
lot of I have a lot of Rahu in my chart. That's good. I have to pay attention to what Rahu
makes you a researcher for sure. It makes you a good researcher.
Yeah, So I have to. That's really the planet. Rahu and Mars are the planets I have to watch out for the most. But basically, we're looking at these things. They all always have some kind of a silver lining to them. So it's not really.
Yes, there is. There's also a lot of confusion. My Jupiter, which rules everything, is sovereign, and and Mercury are associated in big like house of career and also relationship. Everything is connected. Jupiter and Mercury. So when in the early 90s, I bought my first Vedic astrology book. And it was Mercury retrograde. I remember that part. I didn't know Vedic astrology yet. And I knew some Western astrology. So I followed here and there. And I studied it a little. So I decided, no, I already knew yoga. I knew Ayurveda. I want to learn, right? So I bought this book and I didn't understand a single word. And I thought, oh my God, I'm too dumb for this. And I thought, how could it be? But look, I can do this, I can do that. I've had decent feedback about my wits in life. And I've always been intellectual. How can I not? I was starting something new during Mercury retrograde. So it was very hard to connect the dots, also without a teacher. Of course, that's why I recommend proper training. Sure. Just reading a book is not going to help. So I almost gave it up, but fortunately I didn't. That's why I'm still here talking about it. And I don't want to stop. And I will be, I love it. I will love it forever.
So you built up those mind muscles. You built up those
right.
Those comprehension muscles.
But it was very disheartening, and I thought I would not be able to understand it even. I didn't think about teaching it. So about Rahu, that you said something, I would like to add one thing. Do you know the system called DNA astrology? I got 2 certifications, including an advanced one. So I love to see how the planets are seen differently in this system and how they can really help you understand the person at the core. And what I want to say about Rahu is that that's the planet of desire.
Yep.
And basically a birth chart can be seen from where Rahu is, and it's the most important planet, because everything we do is based on a desire. Even the Buddha said we should have no desires. He
Yeah.
wanted enlightenment. Even the Buddha had a strong desire that he left everybody. He left his family, he left his kingdom, he left his money, right? So Rahu is very important to succeed in life and even to have
Yeah.
satisfying relationships, because if you don't want a relationship, you will not have a relationship.
Yeah.
If you don't want money, you will not have money. If you don't want a house, I can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So Rahu takes a totally different, not that Jupiter and Rahu would become suddenly good. That's always
Yeah.
bad, all right?
Yeah.
But in general, people will have to struggle on those things. And maybe they will not respect the teachers, etc. But that's been my experience.
Yeah.
I don't teach anymore people with Guru Chandala because they are very difficult and disruptive. That's my personal, and that's what Kay and Rao also said. They said they will not do readings for them.
Yeah.
I've had my share of stories. I don't want to talk about it, but yeah.
No, I understand, but I think you hit upon one really important point with Rahu, and it's one that I'd like to underscore a lot. Basically, without Rahu, neither of us would be here. And Venus is Rahu's teacher. Venus is the tool through which Rahu reincarnates in the world.
And Venus teaches true love, the true
Yeah.
devotion. It's a very important planet. So
Yeah.
we cannot be, because we're a little confused, I think, on a collective level, because we are in Kali Yuga.
Yeah.
But every planet is divine. Every planet teaches something important, and we need to respect the planets. And even, I don't say worship them, but I do, because that's my job as a Vedic astrologer. I connect with the planets. I honor them with their mantras, etc. But if you don't want to go there, at least, have an open mind. Keep an open mind, because that would be very helpful.
All right.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's about it. I think we both hit on some, at least in my humble opinion, some pretty important points about retrogrades. And number one, it's not to be afraid of them,
right.
Just to be prepared for them, and
do
also
the work.
do
the work,
and also don't just stay in your cave while the retrogrades are out. You have to function.
That's a mistake, because you will not learn the karmic lessons. And then you will miss opportunities. Right?
Exactly. So it's important to get out. It's important so if you want an easy life, that's not going to help you advance spiritually, to be honest, to be truthful with you.
Also, you cannot stay on the earth plane. Easy life is really for few people, and they may regret it in a different life that they didn't learn. Right? It's overrated. An easy life is overrated. There's always desire, and the desire to accomplish something, and maybe to learn and evolve. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gary. It was delightful as usual.
Thank you very much, Lalitha. Same here. Always delighted to see you. Namaste, everybody. Bye-bye now.
See you soon all. Bye. Thank you for watching.
Bye, everyone.